I'm waiting. Yes. So, hello again, everyone. It was really nice pro Zoom chatting, kind of prologue when people meet each other. I'm always enjoy these moments much better than goodbyes and people recognize, and some of them haven't seen each other for a long time. So my name is Dmitry Vilensky, and I'm host or moderator of this iteration of Institute of Radical Imagination under the title We Have a Situation Here. So it already runs for almost half a year. So we have many events. But recently, because of general profiling or focus of our activities of Institute of Radical Imagination, as you all, of course, already heard about, so we, as together with many comrades around Europe and in Russia, and everywhere are really awaiting delegation of Zapatistas who finally should arrive to Europe for different purposes, but mostly to personal encounter with different activists, social centers, and get some knowledge of the struggles locally. And many networks and people are already involved in these preparations. And Institute of Radical Imagination also became part of that bigger community. And we are very interested right now to get deeper knowledge about what kind of how to prepare ourselves for this encounter, simply to say. And we, as collective что делать, start to be involved with the Zapatista ideas, how they influenced our life. So we spoke a lot about it and also produce some different events and educational programs, which we call Slow Learning by Zapatistas. And we did it in Russia, we did it in Italy with Alessandra, who can actually facilitate it and help a lot to make it happen. We did it recently in Greece with Solidarity schools. So it was really a long process for us, but at the same time, definitely it was much more activities before us. And many people who actually work on the site, on Chiapas, in many around communities together with Zapatista communities, and their experience has amazing value. And we really need to get more to know about it. And last iteration, it was Natalia Arcas, who was actually shared her experiences living in San Cristobal and doing her projects, and actually what brought us together at Exhibista of Zapatista Art in Havana in 2018. And today I'm very happy to have Mia and Halib today with us in the studio, and who actually did a lot of projects and lived in San Cristobal and make Adello, former United Nations house occupied by activists and indigenous communities. But they will talk about this project, but also about focus might be today, but they can decide themselves about Zapantera Negra. This really project, and right now I already got gossip, and not only gossip, that it's coming close to Europe, and it will be very soon premiered in Kunsthalle Vienna. Actually, we also part of this project, but I just got to know it just 20 minutes before, and super happy about it that we could meet in person. But actually, I got to know about work of me and Halep through Creative Time Summit. I guess it was 2012. We spoke in 2010, but since then we start to follow activity of Creative Time. And of course, I remember your presentation where you actually for the first time introduce the Pantera Negra, and that you inviting Emory Douglas.
They're everything to me. I spend much more time looking after them.
What? Oh, sorry. It was a little bit intervention. So, and that was really very important moment. And then when we start to work for our project in Mexico at MUAC, and we from the very beginning started to say that we'd like to do something about Zapatista influence on our life. And then immediately it was 2016, 2017, when you actually published your very important book. And I think that book was really crucial for many people who deal with art and activism, and especially relation between art and politics. And this book was actually exemplary. And I hope that in your presentation, you definitely talk about how this book came to life and how it really happened, and some contribution and visuals, aesthetics. So, but then that the idea to match two imaginary, two also different in time and aesthetics together, I think it was quite radical, almost revolutionary mixture of meaning, politics, and sense. So, and I hope you share with us, and then we can join everyone for this assembly, can ask questions, maybe clarify something. Don't be shy, open your screen, talk out, speak out, or just drop questions in the chat. Gabriela Hope will help me to collect these questions. So thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, please welcome. The floor is yours. Yeah.
Hi guys, we're so happy to be a part of this. So nice to see some faces, some that we see every day, and some that we haven't seen in many years. So it's really an honor to be here, and we're love that it's hosted by Dimitri. And yeah, so I guess we could start with a screen share and just get into it. Sorry. So we wanted to start with a little poem that was written by Merecia, who is Emory Douglas's daughter. She came to the encuentro, one of the encuentros that we had in Chiapas. I think it was the second one where Emory was invited to speak at University of the Earth there in San Cristobal, and Mary Cia wrote this beautiful poem. So if we could just start and you guys could close your eyes and kind of take a little meditation to get into the zone. We're so sorry. Technical setback here.
Was called America, and Africa was called Africa. When a snail was just a snail, and a panther was just an animal. Historians write of an ancient Mayan-African relationship, one of trading and exchanging ideas, cultures, goods, and more. Some archaeologists go further. They write that before Mayans and Africans traded, before they were two distinct people, they were one. When I heard that my father would present on our legacy of the Black Panther Party for this symposium, I felt an impulsive reaction to attend, an ancient calling urging me, be there. Let your presence be testimony to the ancestors, that your spirit remembers a time before colonization, subjugation, and plantations. Before Zapatistas took to the mountains in Chiapas and the Panthers to the streets in the U.S., before we were revolutionaries fighting our own distinct battles in different countries, before there was you and I, there was we, and we were one.
So that song was created by Manik B, a musician from San Cristobal de las Casas, originally from San Luis Potosí, right?
Gabi.
And Sister Gabi. And so you can see how visually powerful the body in public space can be. So from our perspective, our point of view, we're coming as a visual artist, not as academics, intellectuals, or not even as activists, but trying to understand what constructs reality. And I wanted to start, can somebody pause their mic? Thank you. I wanted to start with this little house. This house was my grandfather's house in Nogales, Mexico. Right now we're in Tijuana. And I like to start with this because it helps us kind of place ourselves in different ways of understanding reality through architecture, through public space, and through the body. And so we're studying visual culture as painters, as sculptors, and how different cities are manifested, right, depending on their economies. And coming from a border town, you start to realize the illusion and the evidence that capitalism provides for the masses. It's something that cannot be challenged or argued upon so easily. And so what we're talking about is visual evidence of a sense of reality, right? And so personally, I started to construct sculptures based on both store-bought materials and found materials to kind of create that contrast of realities. Soon after, we started working with being the architects of our own realities. Rather than creating sculptures, we're started to create public interventions. This is in Oakland, California, when a lot of public schools were being closed down. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to kind of go on a little 10-minute kind of journey to what led us to open up Adello, where the United Nations used to be, to go and learn from this powerful visual language of the Zapatistas, and determining or in creating evidence for other worlds existing and other possibilities, right? This piece was with undocumented immigrants in San Francisco occupying public space with the body, with ritual, and with sculpture. We occupied galleries, street entrances, bars. This piece was in Honduras, El Pital, and we kind of recreated that same experience, but in a small little town that was experiencing an exodus due to forced migration. You want to?
Okay, so Caleb and I met in graduate school at the Art Institute of Chicago in 2007. In this time, basically I was in a fatal accident that had me have a near-death experience and go through a lot of body trauma, and also spiritual and mental trauma. And so half of myself kind of stayed on the other side, and half of me, this is my experience of it, came back. And so my movement in space, my mobility, the way I interact, the way people started interacting with me, all of my relationships within this world basically took a major shift. And so I started using my body in public space, not necessarily by choice, but it just so happened that because I started to manifest myself in this wheelchair and look the way that I did, I was no longer able to enter into many places where able bodies enter. I became kind of a spectacle in the public realm. And so when before I was quite a shy person, and I still am, I started to actually use my body as a tool to kind of talk about generational traumas and our reality and how it's manifested. And so just kind of like Caleb was using architectural spaces, I was kind of using vernacular architecture in a sense, as in using the materials around me in order to survive. So in this example, like using these rocks so that my palms wouldn't get bloody when I was crawling through a desert. And then people started to come up to me in public space and tell me their own stories and their own traumas, and have really deep connection with me just anyone on the street. And so this really started my my work within the human-made worlds. Before, I was kind of more interested in, I would say, the magical realms or supernatural realms. But this really, with my own suffering and the suffering of others, really started my investigation and compassion into the human world. So I started collaborations with people, you know, dealing with people's own generational traumas and our experiences within the land and the history that holds. So these are many pieces that we created in Adello. Just to give an example of kind of the experience of body being a very strong direction as to what we were investigating. And I continue to always use my body within the work.
And so this is leading up to Zapantera Negra. Just to contextualize it a little bit, we decided after grad school to go back to Chiapas and begin to learn of these other ways of understanding art and life and food and health and social political demands based on public performance, poetry, painting, such a rich visual language that is tied to the Mayan language that is very descriptive, right? Um, and so here's a short little video that kind of talks about how we ended up taking the building of the United Nations when it was occupied for a few days, actually a few weeks, and then it was left empty. So it's a two-story building where eventually we had it for about 3-4 years, and we kept the name of the United Nations to kind of share its history and also to see how artists, gardeners, activists can really take the supposed role of these institutions to create alternative worlds, right?
In the fall of 2009, over 100 displaced indigenous community members occupied the offices of the United Nations located in San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas, Mexico. The offices were taken over in hopes of gaining international attention from humanitarian organizations. After a few months of the occupation, the UN simply decided to find another building and moved. A few months later, 2 artists who had experienced the power of art and its ability to be a radical form of communication moved into the building and began an experimental art space and an intercultural artist residency of diverse practice. They began to invite artists, activists, cultural workers, astronauts, inventors, healers, gardeners, PhDs, and jugglers to take part in creating an experiment on activism and art. It is part of an investigation into how art, in all its disciplines and contradictions, can take the supposed role of such institutional bodies to create understanding, empathy, and to serve as a tool for imagining alternatives to a harmful and violent system that we do not accept. Inspired by the 1994 Zapatista uprising, where word and poetry are used to inspire a generation to imagine other possible worlds, Adello has retained the name of the UN. From 2009 to 2014, Adello, where the United Nations used to be, created sculptural performances and community events through relational aesthetics, social practice, and social sculpture. The building was used as an ever-changing experimental art laboratory and safe house for the community. The work at its core focused on the lessons and use of art by the EZLN that has used art as a main tool to demand immediate and drastic social and economic change as a response to 500 years of invisibility, oppression, and neglect. The works consisted of artist residencies in Zapatista territory as well as at our cultural center. The emerging aesthetic was one of urgency in the face of the continuing clash between colonial and Mayan Mexican indigenous worldviews. Once an experimental intercultural art space inhabiting the building of the UN, Adello is now a conceptual space that forms nomadic collectives creating works with diverse communities. Our work is of urgency. It is storytelling, theater, sculpture, social practice, dance, mural making, and organizing festivals in the spirit of true collaboration and shared authorship with the communities and organizations with whom we work. Urgent art is a specific working methodology that expresses what communities are experiencing and turns that into a visible living experience. This augments the possibilities of using art as a vehicle for possible transformation.
Where does that? So that's how Adello started. It was an experiment of how a physical building can turn into an art piece in itself, or a place to question, create work with an urgency. We thought it would last for like 2 years maybe, but it kind of kept going for about 4 years. And really quickly, some of the collaborations with natural builders, Jaguar de Madera, that created this natural structure inside the gallery. So we did take the formalities of the gallery spaces and worked with that as well as out in the communities or in public spaces. We had some Zapatista members as residents. University classes would use the space, events for children, a lot of indigenous hip hop, different theater collectives formed from psycho magic to more traditional theater of the oppressed. And these are some of the El Ambo Bajo, some of the longer term relationships that we created with autonomous communities.
And our residents were coming from diverse backgrounds, so it was really an intercultural residency, which was made this space really interesting, and I think was a good experience for people, because in a world where, you know, we're so kind of brainwashed into thinking that everyone is the other, you know, it was kind of like a new framework to, you know, based on art collaboration, a way to kind of construct reality and, you know, create with each other instead of just being separate.
And so one of the residencies was Rigo 23. He's an artist, a Portuguese artist that's been working with political prisoners. He worked with Emory Douglas extensively. He had about a 6-month residency creating the intergalactic space program. And so this kind of brought in a lot of mechanics, electricians, embroidery collectives. This is really how it really manifested into one project that it's now traveling. I think it's in the Queen's Museum, or it was. But this is how we got introduced to Emory Douglas through Rigo. And we started to imagine both movements collaborating visually in one way or another. And Emory Douglas was the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party. He was the lead graphic designer of the newsletter. And so the visuals that emerged from the Black Panther Party to present the Black figure in a new way and distribute it in the masses throughout the United States through the newsletter became one of those public interventions. It was not just drawings of Black figures. They were really accessible. They were wheat pasted. They were put in people's homes, in And so we started to kind of see the similarities in the way the body was being used, the way theater was being used in both movements.
In the way that the kind of empowered image of themselves was depicted. So, you know, a lot of times in both of these communities, they were invisible before their movements really came on in the public view. And so through the art created in both of these movements, there were basically images of the people themselves. And so they had a way to see themselves depicted realistically. And it was a strategy to create a solidarity within the community itself.
And so one thing that we started to look at is how the body is used both as evidence with systems of power, theater, of course. The state knows very well symbolism. And so where does the evidence come from when we try to imagine alternative realities, alternative worlds? And so this is the language that was emerging from Zapatismo. And this is the language of extreme evidence from systems of power and oppression. And here we have the similarities of the use of public space. And this is some of the works of Emory Douglas compared to the works out in the communities. And so how the question came, how can we bring these two distinct movements together to ignite inspiration, a conversation? How do we present it to young people in the United States, young brown, indigenous people, Black people in the United States, to understand the power of culture?
You can see, I mean, even the use of costume, you know, the use of kind of taking the individuality away and presenting yourself in the same costume as the whole community really creates a sense of power.
And there's Emory visiting Oventic for the first time. And so what happened is that Emory came to Adello, did a residency for about 3 weeks, and then right away got invited by Universidad de la Tierra the following week. And so he flew back to San Francisco and flew back a week or two later for the second encounter. And that's when we started presenting at the local universities, local cultural centers, and we started to paint murals in the Caracol de Morelia, which is now the Caracol 10. That was the main Caracol that we created the majority of the encuentros. And if for those who are not familiar with Emory's work, this is a short video kind of contextualizing his role in the Black Panther.
For 22 million Black Americans, the dream has been deferred, the promises unfulfilled. Twice as likely as whites to be unemployed. 3 times as likely as whites to die in childbirth. 3 times as likely to live in poverty.
In the 50s and 60s, there was segregation here in the Bay Area and all over the country. There was a curfew for young blacks my age in the Fillmore district where I live. It was a disturbing thing. There were civil rights movements here in San Francisco. They would show on the national news the dogs being sicked on the marchers, being sprayed with the hoses, being beaten with the batons. You would see that. The first time I got arrested was 13 years old. I was out there shooting dice with the older guys. I was just being bad as a youngster. At other times, same thing, being incorrigible, in and out. I went to the California Youth Authority. The last phase you go before you go to prison system. I was accepted to work in the print shop there. And that was really my first introduction to graphic designing. It was suggested that I go to City College. That's how I got exposed to how to put together publications. The whole advertising field was predominantly white. There was myself and maybe one other African-American student in the class. You're coming up at a time when this whole Black Power movement is coming about. I was beginning to do artwork in connection with that. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale took up the challenge and started the Black Panther Party. The symbol of the Panther came from Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. There's a discipline, determination to want to fight against the injustice. Young people who were confronted with the same issues that they are today. Police abuse, justified murders of young blacks, unemployment, wars going on. Even though some of that may have been a foreign language for me from coming out of the hood and where I was, I didn't come in as intellectual. Many people didn't come in the party as scholars, came in because of the desire of wanting to change things. Huey said, we're gonna start the newspaper. We want you to be the revolutionary artist. My mom thought I was crazy. They took out an insurance policy on me because they didn't think I was gonna survive. The initial idea was to inform and to enlighten and to educate people about the basic issues in the community and to tell our story from our own perspective. Initially, it was myself, Eldridge Cleaver, running the whole thing. We used to work out of his studio apartment. We had an X-Acto blade, some white sheets of paper. We would typeset them on the typewriter with the ball, cut and paste them with rubber cement glue. We couldn't only afford but one color ink, and so it was black plus one other color. But as we evolved, we developed into a full-fledged operation. The height was 400,000 papers on a weekly basis. We were creating a culture of resistance, a culture of defiance and self-determination.
The party lives by a 10-point program. Its demands include an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people.
Huey wanted me to draw this pig, and on this pig we were going to put this badge number. It came to me, why don't I put the belt around it, stand it up on the two hoofs? And it took on a life of its own. It transcended the Black Panther Party and the African American community, and that became the symbol of those who were abusing their power. The panther was an animal that if you put it into a corner, it would attack. But it wouldn't attack anyone unless it had to defend itself. Contrary to what people say about the panther, everybody didn't carry guns. And the guns were only for a limited part of the Black Panther Party. Around '69, we began to focus on the social program. We used to get up 3, 4 in the morning, cook the breakfast for kids before they went to school.
To see to it that our children can eat in the mornings, grow up to be strong.
We had a free breakfast program all across the country. But not only the Black Panther Party had them, but you had community begin to do breakfast programs. The treasurer of the state of California said that the Black Panther Party was feeding more hungry children in the United States government, which was true. That's how you had these free lunch programs implemented into the school. I became the Minister of Culture because we began to evolve and grow. The community wasn't then a reading community, but they learned through observation and participation. People would get the gist of the story through just looking at the pictures and maybe reading the captions. I began to mimic woodcuts with markers and pens, playing with shadows and photographs to get that bold, broad look. My art is about enlightening and informing people about issues. Not necessarily everything I do is provocative. A lot of it is based on fact. It may be a provocative interpretation, but it's not a distorted interpretation. You leading by example. Whether people agree with you or not, they're beginning to do it their own way. So you transforming mindsets and thinking, and therefore you become public enemy number one. One of the locations where we used to get our paper printed told us later on that they would let the FBI come in and read the paper. You had dressed enough criminal elements, like Panthers, going into these businesses that were supporting us and shaking them down and threatening them in the name of the Panthers. A young African-American brother who came by the office one day with a forged letter on Panther stationery saying, "Why are you threatening me with this letter, asking me for more money when I'm doing the best I can?" And he's shaking. He's shaking. And Bobby's trying to explain to him that that's not us, that's the police. Black Panther Party's demise was COINTELPRO, the government's program to destroy and discredit the party by any means necessary.
J. Edgar Hoover is on record as branding the Panthers the greatest threat to the internal security of the country.
Infiltrating the party with agent provocateurs to create dissension. They were exploiting our limitations as young people. You have to understand this was a youth movement. Black Panther Party were young people from 16 and a half, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22 years of age. Today, the actual organization doesn't exist, but it left a blueprint for people to be inspired by. Those social programs, being able to use my art to enlighten and to inform and educate, all that is a part of the legacy. Art has relevancy, whether it's to exploit you or pacify you or to enlighten you and inform you. It's a language. That's the power of it.
So Emory is an amazing guy. I think a lot of you guys have gotten to know him. And, you know, we're lucky enough to know him for years. And, you know, he's an amazing person. And so I really like this video. I like when he talks about art as being a language. You know, I can't come to this from an academic perspective, and I know a lot of you guys are, you know, have a more grounded look into this than I could, but just kind of coming into it through our years of looking at both movements and being able to share time and space within this project. Just kind of thinking of art as a language and kind of looking at, you know, for example, the way both movements, they were shapeshifters in a way, like they had certain powers through art. For example, when someone in their community was became a martyr, was killed, they both have the power to make that name greater than the person itself. So, you know, that's one little example. Another thing I'd just like to mention really quickly is, you know, the use of metaphor as a powerful way to ground ourselves in these perspectives. So, for example, the Black Panthers, their use of creating the pig as a character, as a metaphor for the police, or the Black Panthers as an animal who attacks only when they're being attacked, but can do it fiercely, or the Zapatistas, who use this same sort of power, like, you know, creating the snail within the caracoles, like with all this symbology that represents, or, you know, naming people in their communities like Zapatista Esperanza or Zapatista Defensa. These are ways to kind of give people, and both living and metaphorically, a certain power that can really guide both of the communities in a way of living in a self-determined manner. So, you know, these strategies that were used were just very powerful.
And so some of the works that were created, the original Emory Douglas posters became embroidered by different collectives from different caracoles. And so you see them there, they're being worked on. And then they kind of used Zapatista iconography instead of the Black Panther. So there was, instead of a rifle, there was corn, maize. And so there was an interpretation of Emory's work into this embroidery aesthetic, and still using kind of the newsletter format. There you have both pieces next to each other. And so one of the ideas is, how do we manifest a different perspective of how we organize, how we imagine the future? How do we manifest it through a visual culture? And sometimes it's birthed through the absurd, to think that indigenous people can, communities can actually take on the powers of the United States, the powers of the Mexican government, the powers of the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, by using wooden rifles, and poetry and painting. This is one of our collaborators. And so I think we painted several murals out in the communities. We collaborated with a lot of the youth in the Caracol 10. We went to La Escuelita in 2013? And then Comparte 2016 to share some of these encounters.
So in a lot of the encounters, it wasn't just ourselves and Emory by any means. We probably worked with over 50 international and local artists and community members, and different really powerful minds and visionaries coming together, being inspired by the unification of these two movements.
Here's a little tiendita colectiva. Moises Gandhi is a little autonomous community there that we helped transform.
Emory painted those. He's kind of really interesting to work with, because every symbol for him has such power. Every color, every line. It's really kind of a privilege to be able to watch him even make a little mural that big, and take hours and be very meticulous on the significance of it. This was in the Escuelita. Emory, actually, we went with him, and we thought we were going to be able to live with him in one of the Zapatista houses for a week, but he got separated from us, and he got sent a few hours away, like up a kind of, up a mountain in the jungle. And, he had a lot of stories about his time there. And these are just kind of future embroideries that we showed in Cuba.
I think we could begin to kind of open it up to see if there's questions. just wanted to, we started with how we as individuals understand our surrounding, our realities based on our religion, our socioeconomic background, our gender, our race, right? And how that kind begins to construct our sense of place, a sense of home. And then we start seeing these movements that have a collective lens of self-determination, of a different parallel way of existing side next to a capitalist violent system. And so I think the theme I continue to return to is the evidence. What kind of evidence does culture and art and our body provide for constructing a future, right, where we could alleviate suffering, now that we have the technology, the resources, the organization potential. And so these two movements provide that evidence for us to ignite that imagination of the absurd, right? And then we're trying to figure out how to present it in university spaces. Museums have a harsh history of looting, of placing this kind of work in different categories that are not at the top of the linear art history point of view, right? And so there's kind of this distrust to museums and institutions where this work does not really belong. Usually they put this work in cages, right? Historically speaking, how the museums have behaved with how different cultures manifest their reality. And so we're trying to figure out through with curators how these cold white spaces, how they can house these encounters without falling into the trap of making them into artifacts, right? That these are a living way of exercising a living memory, that the memory continues to shift and grow. It continues to shape who we are, right? They're not just embroideries on a wall. And so we're trying to figure out a strategy of how to present this work if it even should be presented. Here we are at Comparte presenting Zapantera Negra to the community in Oventic. And here they are sharing with us some of their theatrical performances and rituals. And Dimitri, do you want to go ahead and open it up? I think we've done an hour here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's really amazing. You know, I somehow followed, but this presentation is really moving. And actually what struck me most seriously, it's incredible belief and trust into images and the role of culture, which actually was quite inspiring through our encounters with Zapatistas and with other situations of that grassroots, that vernacular movements. So you're right, for example, yeah, moving this powerful, politically loaded work into wide spaces, you really feel certain awkward. What you can say, whom you say that. And also, for me, it's also very interesting that relation to the critique of, tradition of criticality, because, you know, to exercise critique, but at the same time create power of the image for transformation. Actually, I found, you use it, this incredible quote from Emory Douglas, illustrate conditions that made revolution seems necessary, and to construct a visual mythology of power for people who felt powerless and victimized. So I would say I can hardly formulate what art should do at this current moment of disasters, catastrophe, and so on. But let's listen. I have some questions, but maybe some people can jump in. Can we stop screen sharing? Would be great to see people. I'm trying also to check. I don't see any question in chat, only kind of inspirational work and really beautiful. And also maybe to slowly get into that conversation. What, from your experience, because you know, for many people, the decision of Zapatistas to come to Europe is quite unprecedented. How it could happen, first of all, because most of them have problems with the paper. Maybe it will be done with the help of National Indigenous Congress. We don't know yet, so I don't want to speculate. But at the same time, how would you imagine this time? Because you know, there is a tradition, because most networks of Greek activists, Italian activists, Spanish people who came to Caracoles provide amazing help in construction, school, hospitals. So it was already one way. And people always in Caracoles was quite curious where they come, where is Greece, where is Italy, you know, it was completely another sense of geography. But this time are coming, and we are a little bit lost because, you know, of course, everyone would like to express amazing hospitality. It will be collect funds, provide accommodation, that's for sure. But what kind of events we would imagine necessary? And you also use terminology of urgent art. What is urgent in this situation? And especially speaking from artistic activist perspective.
Well,
so that's broad kind of formulation of things which I'm really trying to comprehend right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have to just accept that we're in Zapatista time and that we really don't know. I mean, just to go into the Caracoles, sometimes it was 6 hours, sometimes 9 hours, and it's a different time zone. So trying to figure out what the Gira in Europe might look like is like, you know, trying to grab a calendar schedule that just doesn't exist. We have some close allies in the Caracol 10 that are working with us right now to create these flags out of embroidery. And they also have very little information. And so I think it's going to be one of those magical organic movements of people. I know that we tend to want to create an agenda, a schedule, so that we can support, right? But I think just like the campaign of La Otra Campaña, it kind of forms or naturally, organically. But that's about the much information that I have on the tour in Europe. I know they'll be in Paris but I really, we don't have much information even from the Caracoles. So,
but I think, you know, just to go along with that, the idea of like it being an organic travel for them, you know, I think one of their main ideas is to just kind of be seeds and find other seeds in order to be able to, you know, plant together. So, you know, maybe that sounds kind of new agey, but it's also Zapatista language, right? So it's like, you know, I know there's a lot of violence going on and that has always been going on within Zapatista territory, but and within the world. But I think it's, you know, kind of amazing that at this point in time they think, you know, the right thing to do is to you know, go to other regions in order to find that solidarity amongst like-minded communities and people. And yeah, I think the only other really something that's exciting to me is like their method of travel. You know, I've seen these that they may be constructing their own boat. I don't know, maybe you guys know more about this, but you know, there's always like the magical element with them, which I think is it's inspiring. You know, it's an inspiring political tool that they use. So.
Thank you. But I'm sorry for continue interrogating kind of, but would you imagine it makes sense to bring, because actually my impression, there was never, because actually from our encounters with Zapatista painting, murals, and also theater, and all that stuff, I was feel so really deeply inspired. And actually, for me, it would be really important to see how this encounter of artistic language, like, because I think your project is exemplary because you brought that imagery from 70s, from Black Panthers, from different contexts, and find certain correspondence with visual language and certain political impact of this imagery on community at Zapatista, and you create a new project. But would this encounter between Zapatista artists and people who deal with the similar issues in Europe, there are not so many, but at the same time, there are certain kind of position which would really, we could consider as a urgency at the moment.
I mean, I think it is urgent, right? I mean, our look at the state of our world. So, you know, I think, you know, this urgent art that we have created, I think, is reactionary to a form of creating that these communities have been using for a long time. You know, and it has to do with the oppression of the people and the need to survive and using the tools that are at hand. And, you know, I think one of the tools in this day and age is the fact that we're in this global, you know, environment, and we have the opportunity to really, you know, unite in a real way, and we need to. Otherwise, you know, oblivion.
I see Sarah would like to ask. She raised hands.
Yes,
please.
Dimitri. Well, thank you both for this amazing presentation. It was so moving, and thank you for being so generous to share all these images, knowledge, and also the point of view from our own vulnerabilities on how to deal with it. How as you started with the presentation, I think it was beautiful, and thank you for that honesty and that generosity. There was something you said. It's not Caleb. Sorry, I don't. Your name, the name of the other presenter. What is your name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. That you mentioned about them. Sort of academic voices or academic speeches while talking to the art, or you were kind of excusing yourself, but the way you speak about the whole work of them and the whole process, it's been beautiful. And I think we need the people from the art system to reject this kind of academic perspective or academic language, or the way we analyze it, or the way we think it on how to exhibit or display. I think we need to put ourselves in other mood and in other way of thinking when dealing with this. Also, it was so beautiful to see the overlapping in between the two movements and how they managed to arrive to something in common. And I was just thinking about Dimitri's question, for example, in Madrid, when they are coming in September. I think the challenge for us, the ID, and also with all the alliances we are establishing in Madrid, in the social movements and in other platforms in Spain, is to understand the situated and the local urgencies, and how to present or to provoke a situation in which the Zapatista knowledge, the Zapatista practice can be a new tool, or can have another layer with the urgencies of Madrid, for example, that are at this moment a lot and really, really urgent with the conditions. For example, the place we are thinking to maybe create a sort of temporary exhibition that can come from a workshop, from a performative activity of collectively creating something inspired by them and with them, is the kind of dispositive we are choosing. And the idea, or the main goal should be look for these alliances in the associations, in the squad centers, in the already communities existing in Madrid that can that can benefit or that can be part of this moment of sharing the Zapatista thought and way of inhabit the world and so on. So the urgencies are here in Madrid, in Paris, in Athens, in all over the place. So we need to look for how to make them the real issue of the collaboration of the gathering with the Zapatistas. You know, thank you so much, and that was my remark.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that the Zapatista knowledge and language could be manifested in our own circles. You know, for instance, we're creating the Embassy of the Refugee in Frankfurt, Germany in June in collaboration with Syrian refugees. Right now we're here in Tijuana creating the Embassy of the Refugee with Central American refugees. And so this is a fictional space that demands power. It's not an actual institution that we're creating. We're just artists working with oral history, but very much in the spirit of Zapatismo, where we use these fictional spaces of navigation that somehow become reality, right? And so within our own powers, within our own communities and collectives, we can create these imaginary spaces. And of course, we would hope to host the Zapatistas in the embassy over in Frankfurt, Germany, if they go through there, or in Vienna at the Zapantera Negra exhibit. But it's really hard to tell, you know. But I think the inspiration of their language, I think, could really create that ripple effect again through this tour through Europe, right?
Mao, you'd like? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have the little hand. I can't find the function. Yeah.
Please.
Well, first, first, Caleb and Mia, I really thank you very much. It was a wonderful and generous presentation, and all the images and your commentary was all really very powerful. I wanted to just follow up on what Caleb was saying about the the challenge of showing this work outside the space where they're being created, and the struggles and the knowledge that they embody. And yeah, so obviously, initially, I thought that there's no way that they can be shown in a white museum, and so I think that this is probably the challenge that is interesting or important, is to create a space where this kind of art, well, we maybe we don't even have to call it art, but where these experiences can be shared. And then I thought that when you spoke about the fictional space and the idea that this object or this artwork can activate spaces, then I thought that maybe that could be an interesting challenge, would be to really think about where these objects, this collection could activate different kinds of conversation. So maybe it would be interesting also to think with the aim of this kind of Madrid encounter in different places, how to think about spaces to be activated by this artwork rather than a container for them. But I thought it was very interesting what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mao. Yeah, I absolutely agree, because actually the way how images empower people, I wouldn't ignore these white spaces. I would say they have special power too, and we should really reclaim it in many ways. Like now Emory also exhibiting in museums, and I think for next generation it's very important to have that idea and proper genealogy of images without neutralization, because actually it's very big danger. But at the same time, together I hope we manage to resist and maybe reclaim the spaces for something else and distribute it. Yeah, So, because actually you didn't tell that actually the exhibition of the Zapantera Negra will be in Torino, if I can say that. So you're also part of bigger show.
That was something to discuss with Emory and Rigo about the history of the Reina Sofia, and does this work belong in there? The violence of imperialism and colonizations and theft and looting and all this rape and murder. And what is the role of these larger institutions and how they document culture? Do we need that documentation? Do we need it in our schools and our universities? Do we need scholars and PhDs to look deeply and closely into these movements so we can learn, from them? Fortunately, the work in Spain in 2021 is they're called Red Concepcialismo del Sur. I don't know if there's any members of that collective here, but scholars and allies of that level that are sincere and careful with curating such spaces. I think that's a way to kind of share different talents and points of view so that we can occupy these spaces of power, right? These spaces of violence, to introduce this soft imaginary reality into these hard, cold walls that museums can be. That's kind of like my point of justifying our participation in these spaces.
But that actually was also my point. I mean, what I was suggesting is that actually the possibility of navigating around these spaces and not necessarily to be inside them, as probably we would like to do also in Madrid. But I totally agree with this, with this reading of museums.
Please, I didn't notice
that. Just to continue and to echo this reflection around the institutional space, the museum, the university, these are colonial infrastructure. And what we see on the other side is the social and community infrastructure. And I just want to say that you really showed, I mean, in your approach, methodology, and outcome, you really show how to revert and channel another way of producing art, another way of using images, not in a way that is appropriating, excavating these cultures and their languages, but to further their capacity to create relations. And I think in that work, in the textile work, the embroidery, where you really created this opportunity from a south to south struggle and perspective and knowledge making to be so close in the same artifact, and this language to mix and intertwine and tangle in this way, even in the very gesture, because we have to remember that in these cosmopolitics, an object is not just an object, as you say. It contains life. It contains the life of the ancestors. It contains the land. A color is a powerful tool to transform and heal. It's not just a pigment, it's much more. And I think in your work, you exactly manifest this opportunity and this capacity of art and art making as a way to decolonize also the structure of art and knowledge production that we in the West are enclosed in and within. And I think I just wanted to add that your example was really great in that, and it gives us hope that we can do that. And I think for us in Europe, this is really an opportunity not only to organize some kind of event, but really to rethink this structure and institution, and to rethink about our colonial history, and finally get to really, go deeper in that. And absolutely, I agree with Sarah and with Mao and Dima and those that are or trying to put together these encounters, that it has to reflect also the local struggle, situated position struggle from the place of hosting. And this idea of hospitality is just much more than producing an event, is really preparing ourselves to host generously and deeply scrutinizing our history of colonial settler, how we as European, how our ancestors destroyed words, erased cultures, languages. So it's, you know, and how really to foster this conversation, which is happening a little bit in academic space, it is happening in the social movement, it is happening through the reverberation of Black Lives Matter in Europe, the relation with the monuments and all that. But it is still very emergent and very of a niche of us. So I think using these institutions as spaces where knowledge production is made and made visible, made observable, it is challenging, but it is an opportunity to take. So, and again, echoing everyone else, it was fantastic to get to meet your work, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Alessandra, for your comment. Any more questions? Maybe, yes?
Nikolai.
Nikolai, oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's just to echo Alessandra and echo the complexity of the need for the spaces to really elaborate deeper and on the scientific level those experiences. Is one of the examples that Subcomandante Moises gave us in his interview, saying like the youth of Zapatistas is growing and they're very demanding. They are demanding the nuclear laboratory in one of our caracols. But how can we provide it? But they really demand it. So like those spaces are highly needed, the spaces of a deep intervention in the matter, of deep scientific research, like very serious one. As science and as the arts are significantly important for the Zapatistas communities and requested from the youth of Zapatistas. So we cannot really reject the whole system. We really need to scrutinize what are those things applicable to the struggle. And thank you, Mia and Caleb, for just bringing it up in such a way. It's one of those like crucial things that we need to elaborate within our own communities and with our own projects, critically thinking of ourselves and how we are moving. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikolai, for your very great comment. Maybe some more. I'm checking chat. If not, nothing. He has arrived. Yeah. So, any more reflection?
I just want to say something, but I don't know. My English is very poor. But maybe it's important to know where is the context of the Caleb and Mia works, because they works on the community, Zapatista communities, in this lapse of time when the Zapatista communities are closed for the other people. So in 2006, the Zapatistas decide to be closed for became more autonomous. And for 6 years, they are in silence, in some media silence. In this time, just in this time, exactly in this time, I think, Caleb and Mia works inside the community. So I think it's a very important time, because it's in the middle of this time of the Marcos, with the very important image of the Zapatista movement. And then after, the Zapatistas come to the scenario and say, the Comparte Festival start with a theater, performance, dance. But before that, we don't know the Zapatista art. So Caleb and Mia put inside, and I think they're important in this, ¿cómo dice? Desarrollo.
Development.
Yeah, of this kind of new visual culture of the Zapatista movement. And of course, Caleb and Mia have a great management capacity to organize this project with Emory and the Zapatista people. And I know Mia works a lot for our exhibition in Cuba with the people for this super beautiful artwork. But I don't know, maybe me gustaría saber, I just want to ask you if you have more projects, or maybe the idea to bring other peoples in a struggle, because I'm in Chile now, and I'm in contact with the Mapuche people. This is other indigenous movement in resistance. So there are other imaginary, other type of resistance. They are more furious. It's a very, very strong people. It's different character of the Zapatista. So I think it's not easy. And I respect a lot the work of Caleb and Mia on that, because it's not easy to go in a land in resistance, in war, maybe. This is the case of the south of Chile right now. Put project, arts project. Of course, made this encounter. So I think I just want to ask you, how do you think about the future project, or maybe this other possible encounter with other indigenous movement in Latin America, of course?
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you. Yeah, that's.
Thank you for all those comments. It's really encouraging. As Adello, the Adello name came through a Zapatista inspired lens, right? And as Adello and Donde Era La Uno, we're still kind of navigating through different spaces. Mia just came back from Palestine, collaborating with some artists over there. She also did some work in Ayotzinapa. I've been working in the Bay Area, California, with youth from Guatemala that arrived unaccompanied to the US-Mexican border. And so I was working with them for 2 to 3 years with this idea of urgent art, of using the body in public space to demand a certain kind of, to assert a certain kind of visibility to an otherwise underground, invisible youth community from Central America that's really creating a new community over in the Bay Area of San Francisco. We're right here in Tijuana creating this fictional space of the Embassy of the Refugee. And so we're still working with language, with fiction, with theater, with art, with public intervention. And I don't know why this is a good question, why we end up kind of working with almost the most vulnerable of our surroundings, right? For a reason. And I don't know, for me personally, where that is birthed. I am an immigrant myself of a young age, but that is a very good internal question to kind of break apart in order for us to get to the core of why we can imagine a successful struggle, right? we're working with families that are camping out right now at the border. They've been there for about 3 weeks since the Biden administration took over, thinking that they're going to be able to cross and apply for asylum. And so I don't know if you want to add to that. Where does that desire to construct certain realities through art come from, and how can Adello continue to do that, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when you said we tend to work with kind of the most vulnerable amongst us, to me, the people who are the most vulnerable are also, they also have they can have the most imagination, because they're the people who need to create another world in order to survive, and they know how to use the tools that sometimes are invisible to most of us. So yeah, I think, you know, it's hard to say exactly where we're going, but, you know, this work it's a lifelong investigation, and, you know, I know we will continue with the communities that we have already been working with. I mean, it's a relationship, and it's really entering into a dream together. You know, it's not something that lasts only a night or only a day. It's a dream of a heart to really create something, and to do it together, because really, you know, the power of collaboration and of community and of, you know, co-creation, it's powerful. And you know, one of us being artists, one of us being scientists, one of us being, you know, creating a nuclear laboratory. I mean, it's like we all need these different ingredients in order to actually you know, be the majority in this world, and, you know, create a climate that doesn't kill our kids. And, you know, so we, you know, I think since Adello closed, Adello was kind of housed in what was an institutional space. And since then, we've basically created this concept that goes along in these fictional spaces. And so when you work in that sort of a way, it's nomadic, and it can be global in a certain sense. And, you know, I think we both really are inspired by collaboration and other people's talents and minds and magic. So, you know, that includes the Mapuche community. And, you know, we would love to, you know, continue to create roots and create collaborations with people, and, you know, grow these imaginations stronger, so that we can create something that has real impact.
Francisco, please. Yeah.
Hi. I just want to know. How was the process, or what was the difficulties or challenges to work in autonomous territory? Because as we know, the Zapatista movement is not only a movement in resistance; they are a guerrilla too. No? They have a lot of methods, they have a lot of security process to protect their own communities. So how was the process to make the Zapatistas trust in you, trust in your project, and accept to work with you?
I'll say something really quick, and then I know Caleb will have a lot more to say. Just the going back again to art as a language, you know, that concept that Emory said in his video. Art is a language that can really break barriers. I think it can break barriers of security, and it can create trust among people. So I would say that was kind of what we began with, and it's, you know, a communication that was, you know, it's I know some people are, maybe can use art in an imposter sort of way, you know, as a, maybe it's not real to them. But in both Caleb and Mai's life, art has been our savior. So, you know, we're coming from a very authentic and real place. And I think that, you know, when working with Zapatistas, they're a wise group of people, and they're connected to the earth, and they're able to read when people are coming from a you know, a sincere place, or, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long process. It's decolonizing our own mind of how things work. It's being flexible. It's being comfortable with not knowing if something's going to happen or not. I've gotten arrested by the Zapatistas because of a confusion of the changing of La Junta, and I show up with materials thinking that I'm all like, let's get to work, and then we get arrested.
That's true. I was actually with Emory arrested in a room for a while,
Emory, yeah.
which was hilarious.
And so sometimes it was 7 hours waiting for a response, and then you show up 3 months later when you were supposed to, and then the junta changed and they don't know who you are, and so they do a whole background check. I've gotten sent back from different caracoles because they didn't accept my letter, and so it's really a humbling. We're at their service, really. We're learning from them. We're their guests. And it's slowly, I think the language of muralism, I think, really opened up the doors for us. If we were going through an NGO or an academic institution, I think the process is a little bit more difficult for them. We were going as an independent, no sponsor, no funding, really grassroots artists trying to learn, and I think they saw us as that group of crazies as well. I think, I'm not sure, but yeah, there's a lot of other collectives like Zapayasos that took us with them to certain caracoles, and so definitely a lot of artists that were in San Cristobal for a very long time helped us navigate through the process. There's a lot of different musicians and theater collectives that have been working in Zapatista territory since '94, and so they definitely helped us as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I guess
I have a question, because I don't know why in my mind I assumed that there was because in the previous session Natalia and Francisco were sharing with us their experience on organizing this exhibition in Cuba, in Casa de las Americas, and I don't know what I thought while your Caleb and Mia presentation, that there was some sort of relation, but now I see you don't know each other. No, really?
No.
It's the first time you are, in the same room.
No, we were together. But I want to know more about their own experience.
So my question was, because you mentioned Mia Cuba, and if that work was part as well of the exhibition in Casa de las Americas. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I was.
No. It's big reunion, because we all met in Cuba and actually haven't met us since then, It's really right now virtual place. People speak from Tijuana, Chile, Mexico, Russia, Spain. It's quite amazing, but I really dream to meet all of you in flesh, Yeah. Any more questions? Or we should really... Oh, who? Mao?
Yeah, I keep on using my own hand. I'm sorry. No, I was just curious that as Caleb and Mia were talking, I just sank the extent in which the method is becoming so much moving and about finding new spaces and new relationship through bodies, and it seems like you found a kind of nomadic way of operating. And I was wondering, why did you decide why Adello closed? Did it close because you felt that the space was becoming too institutional or too institutionalized, or I'm just curious, and because your practice was becoming more mobile, more interested to keep on moving, let's say, or just because of circumstances?
Sure. Yeah, I think Adello was it from the beginning. It was kind of an experimental art piece in itself, and I think both Caleb and I kind of we didn't. I don't think we even expected. We don't expect it to last for forever. I mean, that seems kind of like putting it in a physical kind of object space is like this needs to last forever, and if it doesn't, then it's a failure and it can't produce. I mean, we just didn't have that kind of mindset about it. So throughout our whole time, it was kind of an experience of listening and an experience of kind of using our intuition to see where the work would go. And it definitely didn't turn institutional, because one of the reasons just sustainability became very difficult, because like Caleb said, we had no financial backing, and we were extremely anti-capitalist. So, most artist residencies would charge, money if a resident wants to come live and work out of the place. We were kind of opposite that. So we would kind of like give everything we had, and it just, I think on a personal level, became unsustainable. And I think also, we created these relationships within the communities, and it just kind of became time to kind of want to focus on that and to focus on these projects, because there was a lot of administrative work with running the art center and a residency, and it seemed like it was taking away from some of our creative and relational potential that we had.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy house. We had a lot of folks living on the margins, right? From musicians to academics. We had a professor from UCLA rooming next to a musician, a juggler from El DF. And so the dynamics was pretty radical, and so sustaining a space like that and the emotional toll that has on us, because we were also living there, and housing people from different what would I say, capabilities of organizing. And so we ended up kind of facilitating other people's projects, introducing to the community, making sure that, our residents had what they needed. And so it became a full-time endeavor. And then, our cultural events became crazy parties throughout the whole night to be able to sustain the space. And that was just we could not, we're getting older.
We were having like health failure, like kind of going crazy. But I will say that, after we closed this space, we did take like a year-long break, but then I went back to San Cristobal and I lived there for years. And, I had planned to go back in May again. So kind of like I said before, like it's not like we deserted our community there. We just couldn't continue in that specific way. And also the space is still a cultural center. So it didn't turn back to the UN building or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really miss that we came 2 years later, but you explain about these golden days really sounds like, wow. Anyway, if we don't have more urgent question, I guess we should really continue with our conceiving and preparing ourselves for next steps. And we really very anxious because situation, you know, Yvette just commented it was really one of most inspiring and moving presentation, and actually also very optimistic one, because also you raise the question, what is revolutionary art in a time of disasters? And actually, I really a little bit relaxed in this spirit and certainly share this inspiration, but at the same time, I feel a little bit trembling even if the Zapatistas will come or not come, because so many people already invest so many anticipation and, you know, energy and dreams into it. So I hope it will happen, or at least, as Yvette mentioned, maybe we reconcile and meet very soon in Vienna, which would be really kind of another miracle. Yeah. And hope, yeah, it will develop. And thank you so much. And actually a very moving project about what you do with the refugees and about speaking about their dreams, imagination, and the role of art in people's becoming. That's what I think we should somehow in that nervous time somehow forget about it, what we can do, and become more skeptical about this power, incredible, which is in our hands and we can really develop together. Thank you so much. And maybe I don't want to stop if any more comments, and yeah, anyway, people are looking forward to see you in Madrid. Yeah. And so,
we're easy to be in touch with, and like I said, we're always looking for inspiring minds and collaborations. So hopefully we can all meet again.
We'll be in Europe for the summer, and in Germany in June, and Vienna in May, and we're gonna try to catch the Zapatista train too. So we'll be with you guys.
But with the Frankfurt, it will be Embassy of Refugees, the project.
Yes.
That's what you mean. With whom you organize it, or you just your project? Can you comment?
It's called Tiny B. They invited 9 artists to create a livable public sculpture, and so we decided to do some temporary livable space in downtown Frankfurt. And so we're kind of doing that kind of project here in Tijuana. We're going to take some of the art that we produce here to with Syrian refugees to see if we can share some of similarities in experience.
Good. So you have really a long tour in Europe this summer. Hope it will be possible. Let's pray with all our ancestors to make it happen, because we really need it, because we are somehow at the edge of despair and situation.
Pandemic.
Yeah, but keep that good spirit. And thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this presentation, and we can our process of preparation ourselves for this important encounters.
Thank you for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Coming.
Everyone, thank you, Ella and Iri.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful space always.
Thanks, Gabriela, for helping to moderate and recording. Yeah, it's really value. Thank you. Goodbye.